Hey Merfolk fans, I'm Joe. Thanks very much for joining me today. If you'd like to support my channel, please check out the link above to my Patreon page. I'm back with my sideboarding guide for this Benthic Biomancer list that I've been running. The previous video covered Izzet Phoenix through Storm. So I've got those decks laid out in the spreadsheet here already, and we're going to go ahead and check out Tron. So I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in the first video, but this is a pretty new approach for modern Merfolk, running the 4 Wizard Retorts in the main, and obviously Benthic Biomancer is a totally new card. So I am making some of these decisions on the fly. We're doing our best, sort of looking at what the opponents are running, what their main strategy is, and trying to think about how we can best fight their strategy. So there are things I'm going to forget or not even think about. So I'm looking to you guys to fill in any of the gaps that I might have left in my decision making. Please let me know any thoughts that you have about any of these matchups. Maybe you have some cool technology that I've never thought of. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into Tron. It's a pretty old deck, pretty well known at this point. 3 Walking Ballistas, that's unfortunate. 3 Worm Coils, 1 World Breaker. They usually, they can go fetch this guy off of Sanctum of Ugin, or they can trigger Sanctum of Ugin with him. Ulamog, Karn, Ugin, all of these gross spells. So what do we do against this deck? So let's see. No relics, no Tidebinders, no Dispels. Not bringing in Dismembers. We are going to bring in 2 Vensers. So actually, I'll copy that from over here. And what else? Definitely bringing in the Clique so that we can pause them on their draw step and take any of their huge sorcery speed things out of their hand. Any of their haymakers. It can be a creature, planeswalker, an Oblivion Stone. Did I see an Oblivion Stone in there? Oh yeah, here it is. Gotta be down here. 4 Oblivion Stones. So that card that can wreck us, as you know. And then Echoing Truth also comes in. The thing about Echoing Truth and Venser is that kind of a combo with our counter spells, the retorts, because if they resolve something that we would not have liked them to resolve, and then draw into a counter spell, we can bounce it to their hand later with Echoing Truth or Venser, and then counter it with a retort. We're pretty well set up against Tron in the main deck with this build because of the counter spells. Usually the game will end because they've landed one sort of crazy threat. Well, whether it's an Oblivion Stone or a Karn, setting them back on that first big threat by countering it can be pretty huge. So as I said, we're pretty well set in the main deck. The extra Clique will help a lot. Hopefully getting rid of one of those big threats. And then, the Vensers and the Truths are just aimed to give us a little bit of time. The Echoing Truth can potentially save some creatures in the event that the opponent cracks an Oblivion Stone. Also, if you've already committed a couple of Spreading Seas to the board and they go for Oblivion Stone, you can always bounce your Spreading Seas back to your hand and redeploy them on their Tron lands. So it looks like we only need to cut 4 cards. Definitely not cutting Vials, Spreading Seas, Retorts, Echoing Truth. That brings us to our creatures. Master of Waves is really weak to Walking Ballista, so I think that's just an easy cut. You just take out all 4 Master of Waves, and I think that just kind of satisfies what we're looking for. Harbinger obviously not at its best in the matchup, but if the opponent attacks with a Worm Coil and you happen to have an AEther Vial up or 4 mana, you can flash in Harbinger and bounce that thing. Trickster's really great because it can buy us turns against Worm Coils. Also, you could do tricks like if the opponent cracks an Oblivion Stone with a Worm Coil on the board, you can flash in Trickster and take away the Worm Coil's text so that they won't get tokens when the Worm Coil dies. You'll lose your Trickster, but you'll prevent them from getting the 2 Worm Coil tokens, which is, I think, a pretty good trade. Yeah, so pretty easy decision there. Even our little 1-drop can become a 2/2. So just naturally pretty strong against Walking Ballista. I mean, not amazing, because Walking Ballista is just a house against our deck, but much better than 1/1s like Curse Catcher and Mistcaller. All right, so yeah, pretty straightforward decision making there. We're going to take out the 4 Master of Waves because we don't want our 4-drop to just get pinged for 1 damage. And yeah, the 4 cards we're bringing in are much better in this case. So Tron out of the way. Let's keep on moving. We'll go to Bant Spirits. This is an interesting matchup because Spirits is, I think, a substantial amount higher than us in the metagame, but I think we're just naturally pretty well set up against them. Their creatures have evasion with flying. Our creatures tend to have evasion with Island Walk in the matchup, so we're just sort of ships passing in the night, but our creatures tend to get a little bit bigger, a little bit faster. So looking at their list, they have the new Lord from M19, Supreme Phantom, Drogskull Captain. It's a 3-drop Lord. Our Lords are all 2-drops, I guess, so they do come out a little bit faster. Phantasmal Image can copy those Lords, so I guess in theory, compared to my list right now, they do have more access to more Lords. But with a slightly higher curve, we tend to be the faster deck. They have access to 2 Path to Exiles, 4 Collected Companies. Those spells could be an argument for bringing in Dispel in the matchup. As an AEther Vial deck, our counter spells can naturally be pretty poor. Checking out Bant Spirits Sideboard against us, I guess they might bring in a Dromoka's Command. What else? Maybe a Detention Sphere. Not too much, I don't think. Possibly Geist. Possibly Night of Autumn to deal with. Well, almost definitely Night of Autumn to blow up one of our AEther Vials. Doesn't really change our plan too much. So what are we going to be doing here? What's good? Tidebinders can hit Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch. So that's a possibility, but not super amazing since most of their creatures are blue and white. The threatening ones are. 2 Dispels, as I mentioned, kind of a possibility. Dismember's definitely coming in. Let's go ahead and just start with that. Didn't quite catch that here. Dismembers. And then Venser is solid. It's a little bit slow, but it is creature interaction that works with AEther Vial. Clique is amazing because, it can actually do something against their flyers. And Echoing Truth is pretty good since it interacts with their creatures. So that's definitely 6 cards in. What would our definite 6 cards out be? So we're typically going to expect to have access to Island Walk against this deck. Hollow Fountain, Island. They can, with certain hands, keep us off of Island Walk. So they have a single breeding pool, a bunch of fetch lands. So yeah, I think against Bant and certainly against blue-white spirits, we can expect to have access to Island Walks. So what if we go ahead and trim all 4 Cs? It's going to open up a lot of space right up front. The retorts are not great, again, because of AEther Vial. They can be okay in game 1, but I think they can be a liability in subsequent games. Possible that we may want to substitute in some number of Dispels, because the spells that we're going to be more likely to be able to counter are Collected Company and Path to Exile. So what if we go ahead and cut all 4 retorts? That's going to bring us to 8 spells, and then we're at 6 up here. And then if we add in the 2 Dispels, things get nice and neat. So let's just rearrange these a little bit. Okay. So I don't think I'm forgetting anything here. Obviously, all of our creatures here are pretty good. Yeah, take out the Cs, take out the retorts. That's 8 slots that we get to improve. We bring in 2 Dismembers, Echoing Truth, Venser, lots of ways to interact with their creatures. Clique to attack their hand. Clique is also great against AEther Vial decks. That was another point I forgot to make against humans, is that if they activate AEther Vial, that's an excellent time to flash in Clique before they get to put in a creature. If they only have 1 3-drop and their AEther Vial's on 3, you can take their 3-drop and they won't be able to put it into play. So really strong. If they have 2 3-drops, you can take away, the better one, or the one that would hurt us more. So against spirits, if they activate AEther Vial to put in a Lord, or like a Drogskull Captain or Phantasmal Image or anything crazy like that, cast Clique or Violin Clique, take away their card. It's pretty strong. So 8 cards in, 8 cards out. Again, please let me know your thoughts. Let's keep it moving. We'll go to blue-white control next. All right, so this deck is running 2 Snapcaster Mages, 2 Vendilion Cliques, 2 Teferis, 3 Jaces. Let's check out their sideboard here. These guys are almost certainly bringing in Baneslayer, Settle. Settle is an excellent target for Dispel. Going to bring in Lyra. Maybe Spell Queller, I guess. Oh, look at this sideboard. I don't think this is stock, but it's pretty wild. It's all these singletons. So I think, we get the gist in this matchup. They have Planeswalkers. Jace is great in the matchup because he can brainstorm and set up Terminus. Hieroglyphic Elimination as kind of an instant speed way to hit Terminus on our turn. Pretty solid. They've got a bunch of counter spells, Logic Knots, Monolink, Negate. In the main deck, really we're looking out for Cryptic Command, a Singleton Search for Azcanta. I haven't looked at lists in a while, but that really surprises me. I thought they ran more than this. They've got the 4 Celestial Colonnades. I'd be really interested to look at other lists to see if that's unusual, that they're only running a single Search for Azcanta. They've got, obviously, 4 Path to Exiles, a Singleton Oust as like a 5th Path to Exile, Supreme Verdict, which we typically have a hard time dealing with, but Venser can help us with that. So let's go ahead and jump in. Off the bat, we're going to take out all 4 Spreading Seas, leaving in Vials, leaving in Retorts. We may want to leave in a Singleton Echoing Truth, but not bring in another. It can be really good against... first of all, board wipes if they try to kill our dudes, and if you have an Echoing Truth in hand, that's an excellent reason to run out multiples. Like if you have 2 Silvergills, run out your 2 Silvergills. If they go for Supreme Verdict, you can just bounce them both to your hand. If they go for Detention Sphere, you can bounce them both to your hand. That's huge value. You get to redraw cards, basically counter the Detention Sphere. Whereas, if you had typically no Truth in hand, if you had a Silvergill on the board, you'd probably want to play out another creature before a Silvergill so that you can avoid getting blown out by Detention Sphere. Looking at the deck again, we see they have a Singleton Detention Sphere, and they often have another 1 or 2 of them in the sideboard, though you don't see that here. So we took out our Seas. I'm going to leave in the Single Truth, but not bring in any more. I'm sorry. I wanted to talk a little bit about Seas. The gentleman who went 5-0, I think it's Jordan Pippard, Le Pip, said that he doesn't take out his Seas in this matchup, which is pretty interesting because obviously you can hit Celestial Colonnade, which is great, but you can also hit a flipped Search for Azcanta, which is one of their ways that they can really run us over. I'm not really sold on leaving in all the Seas. Let's say, for example, that we want to test the strategy out, so I'll just cut 2 Seas for now, see what else we need space for. So Harbinger is pretty poor. We can go ahead and cut our 2 Harbingers. The things that they're attacking with, Celestial Colonnade has Vigilance, so you can't even bounce it with Harbinger. I guess, their Angels tap when they attack, if I'm not mistaken. They don't have Vigilance, do they? That one doesn't have Vigilance, and Lyra doesn't have Vigilance, so yeah, those guys are bounceable, but yeah, we have better answers, I think, than We just want to counterspell those things, or just win first, basically. Going to keep the Lords, going to keep the Master of Waves, even though they're a little bit weak to Path to Exile. And we're definitely bringing in an extra click, so not taking out the other one. We want to bring some number of relics, but possibly not, because looking, they don't have, they certainly won't be playing a full playset of Azcanta. This list is only running 1. And then they only have 2 Snapcaster Mages, so they're not leaning really hard at all on the sideboard. I mean, sorry, on the graveyard. So we may want to bring in some number of relics, but definitely not all. We're definitely bringing in the 2 Dispels. That card's going to be great. Absolutely bringing in the 2 Vensers. It's kind of another counter spell. We're definitely bringing in a Singleton Clique. And yeah, as I said, we're not bringing in the extra Echoing Truth. So that looks like we want to bring in 5 cards, and so far I only have 4 coming out. If we try to think about what the best next card would be, or the next worst card to take out, Trickster has Flash, so it can be good to send in on the opponent's end step to attack a Planeswalker, but they don't have a lot of they don't have a lot of creatures that we want to tap down, actually. But I think having an instant speed creature outweighs that fact. I think just flashing this guy in is going to be pretty strong. I think we can probably trim a Lord, because they're not really trying to block us, I guess, they probably have Timely Reinforcements, right? Yeah, there's Timely Reinforcements. We see a single copy here, but I know for a fact that that other lists run more than 1. We do have counterspells for that, but they're typically not going to have a lot of blockers, so I think we can cut 1 Lord. You guys let me know what you think. But that's 5 in, 5 out, choosing to leave 2 Spreading Seas in. It's a card that cycles in the late game, hopefully takes them off of one of their Celestial Colonnades, ideally would take them off of their Search for Azcanta. So yeah, that's blue-white control. Moving on, we're going to see Amulet. This is a matchup that has been improved noticeably by adding in the main deck counterspells. So these guys have a single Walking Ballista that they can search up for with a couple different ways. They can use a Summoner's Pact to get it, and they can also use Tolaria West to get it, since it costs 0. Effectively, what we're looking to do in this matchup is just counter their Primeval Titan. If we look at their lands, they have 29 and 1 Cavern of Souls. So if they don't have Cavern of Souls, which is most of the time, we can just counter their Primeval Titan. So that's plan number 1. Let's see what we've got and what looks good in the matchup. Spreading the Seas is poor in general because, first of all, they don't have a ton of blockers. They're going to be bringing in Hornet Queen against us, but it's a singleton, and they're not going to. I haven't seen it in a while. When you do see it, it would help to have Island Walk, but they're bouncing their lands all the time. So the only thing Spreading Seas can help you do is if you put it onto one of their Karu lands that produces 2 mana, in order to play it again, they have to bounce it back to their hand, play it again, and then bounce another land because of its trigger when it enters the battlefield. So it can be a good tempo play, but it's definitely not that important for us. So I tend to sideboard out 3 Spreading Seas against Amulet. Let's see. The retorts are central to our strategy. If we look at the instant spells that they play, Summoner's Pact is really strong, so I think Dispel is a worthwhile addition just to hit Summoner's Pacts. But what do they have any extra ones in the sideboard? Oh, they have another Cavern of Souls in the sideboard. That's interesting. Well, I guess they have Paths, which is another good reason to bring in Dispel. So yeah, we may want to bring in Dispel. Let's keep looking. Definitely 3 Tidebinders here. Where's my Tidebinder? +3 Tidebinders. Locking down a Primeval Titan with Tidebinder is pretty hilarious, I think. Dismember, not really great because Primeval Titan is a 6/6. You can hit an Azusa. But the timing has to be pretty good on when you have the Dismember. I mean, if they have a Susa out, they can play a land, and then in response to like the Carry Land's trigger, you can Dismember her. That's like, you have to have it at that exact time. So I tend to not bring in Dismember. Venser is absolutely coming in, because if they tap out to play a Primeval Titan, you can just counter it when it's on the stack, or return it to their hand. It actually gets around Cavern because it doesn't try to counter it. And by doing so, you actually prevent the Primeval Titan from getting the enters the battlefield trigger. Whereas a typical bounce spell like Echoing Truth, they'll of course get their lands because the Primeval Titan enters the battlefield. So 2 Vensers, we are absolutely bringing in the Clique and the Echoing Truth. So +3 Tidebinder, +2 Venser, plus a Clique, plus a Truth, and I may want to bring in the Dispels. So we're going to take out the Harbingers, because when Primeval Titan attacks, it attacks with Vigilance. And we cannot bounce things that don't tap with Harbinger. So easy choice to take that out. We already took out 3 Cs. Let's see, we have 8 cards to take out, so that means we need 3 more coming out. Trickster is one of our best cards in the matchup. Master of Waves is a little bit weak because of the Walking Ballista. So we can trim some number of Master of Waves for sure, but he can be a good card. Once we get AEther Vial ticking up, putting him in on an end step is pretty solid. So let's see. We can't really rely on the Island Walk approach because we're sideboarding out the Spreading Seas almost entirely. So if we are going to bring in 8 spells, we need to take out some more stuff. What if we go ahead and say that we're taking out 2 Master of Waves, 3 Master of Waves, or more? I think we like to have the option of going wide, so I don't think we want to take out more than 3 Master of Waves. -3 Spreading Seas, -2 Harbingers. That brings us up to 8 and 8. So we'd be bringing in... Oh, what did I do with Venser and Venser? That's strange. So it's supposed to be Tidebinder, Dispel, Venser, Clique, Truth. It was supposed to be Clique and Truth here, not... Let's see. So Tidebinder, Venser, Clique, and Truth. That should be 6, Tidebinder, 5, 6, 7. So 7 cards. And then if we want to add Dispels, that would be 8 and 9. So you just have to think about whether Dispels are better than our other cards. And I think they are pretty good, actually. Honestly, I haven't seen Path to Exile against this deck. I have seen a lot of Engineered Explosives. Summoner's Pact is decent, a decent target, obviously, for Dispel. Yeah, I think we want to bring in all the kind of interaction that we can, so let's go ahead and bring in the 2 Dispels. Sorry, let me move these guys down a little bit. So that would now be 8, 9 cards coming out. We currently have 8 here. So... The reason I leave in a single Seas is if they, in the event that they do land like a Hornet Queen, at that point we would typically have a nice board, and we can just slam a Spreading Seas and hopefully just win the game on the spot with Island Walk. So it's nice to have that out. Also, the single Spreading Seas can just cycle itself, so I like having access to the Island Walk. And as I mentioned, I like having the option to potentially go wide and go around a big blocker. But, Master of Waves might just be slow and... I'm going to go ahead and cut all 4 Master of Waves here. We'll have him in game 1, and... game 2, we can do our best with, Vendilion Cliques, getting in the air, and lords, tricksters, silvergills, all that kind of stuff, chipping in turn after turn as we delay their Primeval Titan. So Tidebinders to lock up the Primeval Titan, Vensers to bounce the Primeval Titan, Dispels to counter Path to Exile and to counter Summoner's Pact, Clique to ship a Primeval Titan out of their hand, Echoing Truth to bounce a Primeval Titan, taking out 4 slow creatures that are weak to Walking Ballista, taking out 3 Seas that can just get bounced off their Karu land, so generally not amazing in the matchup. Good for an Alpha Strike, though. And 2 Harbingers, because, again, the Primeval Titan attacks with Vigilance, so it doesn't really tap. So that's 9 cards in, 9 cards out. That's enough for that matchup for now. Let's see. How many more do we have left? We can look at Jund next, and then maybe save the following 4 for a final video. Okay, so let's see. What do we have left? We have Jund, Affinity, Hardened Scales, Rock, and Jeskai. So jumping into Jund, which I've been seeing a lot of. I've been seeing a ton of Jund and a ton of just plain old black-green Rock. The biggest threats that these decks play against us, I think, are Dark Confidant. Kalitas is a real beating for us. They can bring in Kitchen Finks, but it's really not that strong against us. We can get into situations where they're like, block one of our creatures and we can flash in a Trickster, take away Persist, and then Kitchen Finks just dies. We also have Relic of Progenitus. If push comes to shove, we can just exile Kitchen Finks in response to its Persist trigger. Clearly, Anger of the Gods, we're going to want to watch out for. Let's see. Collective Brutality is one of their ways of dealing with Master of Waves. Liliana, the Last Hope, is another one. But looking at their main deck, they have 2 Fatal Push, 3 Assassin's Trophies, and that's pretty much the only way that they can deal with Master of Waves, apart from, Thought Seizing him away. So Master of Waves is a really excellent way for us to win against Jund. Bloodbraid, not a huge concern. We can usually just trade with a Silvergill or something. So let's check out our sideboard, and we are, again, going to be following the mid-range strategy that I was discussing with Nikachu based on a lot of testing that he did against a friend of his who plays black-green Rock. It's a pretty similar matchup to Jund. So I'm going to take out just a single AEther Vial here, I think. I'll go ahead and put this over here and take out 1 land. I guess the idea here is that we're trying to improve our top decks a little bit by trimming back on, poor top decks. The reason that Vial can be considered pretty strong against these mid-range matchups is they have a bunch of sorcery speed stuff. I guess namely Liliana of the Veil. Most of the rest of their stuff is instant speed, but if they try to make us sacrifice a creature with Liliana of the Veil, or if they would prefer to, we can wait until their end step and then Vial something in. Can be really, really strong against that part of their strategy. Obviously, also flashing in like Harbingers to bounce attacking creatures is pretty good. So I mentioned earlier, I've been keeping in 2 Vials. I'm going to try this strategy that Nikachu has been playing and see how it goes for me. There's no way to know what works best unless you test a lot of different things, and so that's what I'm going to be doing here. We're clearly bringing in the Tidebinder Mages. Clearly going to bring in the Relics, so we might have to figure out some other cards to take out here. Dispels, Dismembers, definitely bringing in Dismembers. We'd love to be able to deal with a resolved Dark Confidant. Venser, I'm not really convinced of in the matchup. He can bounce one of their creatures, but these games go super long and they can just replay it. We're not trying to counter like a Supreme Verdict or delay a Supreme Verdict. Bouncing one of their creatures and getting one of our creatures seems like decent value, but I'm just not convinced. We do want to bring in Clique in the matchup. It's just going to be better than some of our other options because pause them on their their draw step, and we can ship a Bloodbraid Elf or a Kalitas or an Anger of the Gods. Yeah, Chalice is going to be a really, really solid choice. And Echoing Truth, not going to be a good choice. This is not a deck that plays like Lingering Souls. And again, similar to Venser, bouncing stuff, you're not going to get so much value out of it because they can just replay it. So what are we going to cut to make room for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cards? That's a lot. So we already cut 2. I guess that means we have to cut more stuff. Now, I'm not really impressed with the main deck counters. They can do a decent job in game 1, but that seems like an easy cut to make room. We are going to get rid of the Echoing Truth. So that's 4, 5, 6, 7. As I was mentioning, the Harbingers are not the most sensational value. I sort of hesitate to take them out because many games, they'll be cracking in with a big Tarmogoyf, but at the end of the day, they're just going to replay that thing, and Harbinger, not the best blocker in the world, so I think I'll take out the 2 Harbingers. Again, just based on the notion, the strategy that bounce is poor against mid-range decks because they have all the time in the world. So let's see. -6, 7, 8, 9, and we're bringing in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we took out 4 counter spells, took out 2 Harbingers, and remember that Harbingers are effectively getting replaced by Tidebinder Mages, which are 10,000 times better in the matchup. So 10 in, and we only have 9 out so far. That means we have to trim 1 more card. Trickster is like a removal spell against Tarmogoyf. And then definitely not taking out Master of Waves. Let's see. Might have to actually trim a single Lord. I quite like Ben in the matchup, although they can remove him in response to the Adapt. So maybe I trim a single Ben before I trim a Lord. Our Island Walk strategy is really strong against them. So that'll bring me to taking out 3 creatures, but bringing in 4 creatures. 4 excellent creatures in the matchup. Taking out a Vial, an Island, a Truth, and 4 Retorts, bringing in 4 Relics, 2 Dismembers. Just to quadruple check, it's 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're taking out 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Feels pretty good. And I think this is where I'm going to end this video. We'll jump back in the next one and finish up with the 2 versions of Affinity, Rock and Jeskai. So I'll see you guys there. Please leave your thoughts down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Please check out my Patreon page. And yeah, let's wrap up this sideboarding guide in the next video. I'll see you there. Bye-bye.